I walked in and overheard my wife and her coworkers planning a 7-day silence test to manipulate me and measure my devotion. They wanted me to beg. Instead, I used that entire week to consult a lawyer, divide our assets down to the penny, and secretly move out. She came home to an empty closet and a letter explaining the true cost of her psychological games. My name is Michael. It all started last Tuesday. When I got home a little earlier than usual and without intending to, I discovered something that had no justification. We hadn't argued, we had no unresolved issues. Yet my wife, Sarah, was planning to completely ignore me for 7 days. It wasn't her decision, but an idea her coworkers had put into her head, convincing her it would be a sort of empowerment experiment to gauge how much I would seek her attention. I came in through the garage around 6 p.m. after running some errands. Before reaching the dining room, I heard Sarah's voice. She was on speakerphone with 3 of her colleagues, Lauren, Ashley, and Taylor, the same ones who for months had been filling her head with questionable relationship tactics. I stayed hidden in the hallway, close enough to hear every word without being seen. "Listen, Sarah," Lauren said with a self-assurance that immediately irritated me. "You're too accessible. Men don't value what they get so easily. It's basic psychology." Ashley then chimed in, enthusiastic. "Exactly. My boyfriend took me for granted until I didn't talk to him for 3 days. Now he practically worships me. He texts me good morning, asks about my day, organizes dates. Everything changed after the silence." My wife's voice sounded doubtful, which gave me minimal relief at that moment. "I'm not sure," Sarah responded. "Michael and I always communicate well. This seems dishonest, like I'd be playing games." But Taylor quickly intervened. "It's not dishonest, it's strategy. You're demonstrating that you are the prize, that your time is valuable. My therapist calls it creating healthy space." Lauren took over the conversation again, this time detailing her master plan. "Here's what you need to do starting this weekend. Total silence for 7 days. Don't reply to messages, don't return calls. If you're home together, barely speak. Just act busy and inaccessible. Make him wonder what's going on." Sarah hesitated. "A whole week? That sounds too extreme." Ashley tried to reassure her with another story. "Trust us. My cousin did it with her fiancé. On the 3rd day, he sent her flowers. On the 5th, he organized a romantic weekend in the mountains. On the 7th, he replaced her ring with a better one. It was the best thing she could do for the relationship." I felt my jaw clench as I leaned against the wall. My pulse pounded in my ears. Then I heard Taylor excitedly add, "Oh, and document how he reacts. Take notes, photos if you can. I want to see how long it takes him to panic." Ashley capped it off with an authoritative tone. "The key is not to break the silence under any circumstances. If he asks what's wrong, tell him you're stressed about work. Keep everything vague. The uncertainty will make him value you and fear losing you." Then came the question I most feared hearing from Sarah's lips. What if he doesn't react? What if he just continues his routine without showing concern? Lauren let out a laugh. "That would mean he doesn't value what he has with you, and you could make decisions with reality on the table. But honestly, no husband can stand his wife ignoring him for 7 days without trying to resolve it." Ashley added firmly, "Think of this as a test. If he loves you, he'll do everything possible to win you back. If not, better to know now than after wasting more time." Sarah let out a long sigh that chilled me. "I guess it makes sense viewed that way. Lately I feel like Michael takes me for granted, that everything is too routine." Taylor immediately encouraged her. "That's comfort. It's the same as complacency. Shake him up. Show him your worth. Make him remember why he married you." Lauren closed the conversation with a triumphant air. "Start this weekend. We'll be with you every day. You are going to feel powerful, Sarah, like a completely new woman." I couldn't listen anymore. Not only were they giving her terrible advice, they were pushing her to psychologically manipulate me for a whole week, treating me as if I were part of a social experiment for their entertainment. The worst part was hearing that my own wife was considering it, even getting excited about the idea. The woman I had been married to for 6 years, to whom I had never lied or failed, was planning to deliberately ignore me to establish dominance. For a moment, I wanted to walk into the dining room and confront all those women, tell them exactly what I thought of their games, and make it clear that I wouldn't tolerate that treatment. I also wanted to tell Sarah that she deserved better than that kind of advice, but a cold, strategic thought stopped me. If Sarah wanted to test me with silence, she was going to discover something fundamental about me. I do not beg for attention. I do not chase after someone who chooses to ignore me. And I never participate in games aimed at manipulating a relationship. If she wanted to disappear me for a week, I would disappear from the marriage. I backed down the hallway silently, went out through the garage, and got into the car. I drove to a nearby park and sat in front of the lake, watching the water as my mind began to trace the steps to follow. I had 7 days while Sarah played her experiment, and I would use that same time to prepare my response. 7 days. That was the time I had to prepare the exact scenario in which Sarah would return home expecting to find me desperate to reclaim her attention, ready to plead, anxious for her forgiveness. In her mind, I would be completely surrendered to the absurd game she and her friends had devised. But instead of the broken man she expected to see, what she would find was an empty closet, our accounts separated, and a perfectly organized package with the divorce papers. I took out my phone and opened the Notes app. I needed a step-by-step plan, with no margin for error. Secure my finances, transfer exactly my half, immediately look for a place to live, pack neatly without her noticing, consult a lawyer to initiate the legal separation, save receipts, screenshots, photos, and leave an impeccable record of every move. This was not about revenge or spite. It was self-respect. When someone shows you they are willing to manipulate you for fun, the healthiest thing to do is believe them the first time and act accordingly. An hour later, when I finally managed to calm the adrenaline, I returned home. Sarah's call had already ended. She was in the kitchen preparing dinner, humming with a slight smile, as if what she had planned with Lauren, Ashley, and Taylor had been an achievement to be proud of. "Hi, honey," she said enthusiastically when I crossed the door. She even approached to kiss my cheek affectionately. That show of affection, I knew then with an almost painful clarity, would be one of the last genuine ones I would receive in several days. "I didn't find the primer paint I needed," I replied, trying to sound relaxed. "I'll buy it over the weekend." She nodded distractedly, already mentally focused on her empowerment exercise. That night, as we lay in bed, I watched her profile illuminated slightly by the hallway light. She seemed excited, even anxious to put her performance into action. She had no idea of the impact of what she was about to do. Friday arrived punctually, and with it, Sarah's first act. When I walked through the door after work, I found her sitting on the sofa with her phone in hand, deliberately ignoring my presence. "Hi," I said naturally. "How was your day?" She glanced up just enough to feign interest. Her expression was cold, as if she were talking to a stranger. "Lots of things pending." "You know how it is," she replied before focusing back on the screen. I tried another approach. "Do you prefer to order something for dinner? Or should I make something quick?" "Whatever you want, I'm not hungry." Without looking at me, she continued scrolling on her phone. The experiment had officially begun. I made dinner anyway. Chicken with vegetables. When I brought her a plate, she only mumbled an almost inaudible, "Thanks," and locked herself in the home office, closing the door with a firm bang. There was the ghost she had decided to become. She thought I would end up begging for attention, asking 1,000 times what was wrong like an insecure teenager, but she had chosen the wrong husband. While she hid behind her door believing she was establishing power, I was in the kitchen looking for rental apartments. That very midday, I had already spoken with a lawyer and also opened a new bank account at another bank. On Saturday, Sarah acted as if she were extremely busy. She moved from room to room with her laptop, wearing headphones almost all day. I told her I was going out for a few hours, and she barely moved her head. My plans advanced without interruption. First stop, the bank. I transferred exactly 50% of the joint savings to my new account. I left her portion intact. I saved screenshots and receipts. Second stop, a lawyer's office. We reviewed separation options and asset division. We opened the file. Everything would be ready by the following Friday. Third stop, a temporary furnished one-bedroom apartment, month-to-month contract. I signed it right there. Fourth stop, a storage unit. It would serve to store provisions and organize the move. More documentation to back my steps. When I returned, Sarah was locked in the bedroom, laughing with her colleagues on a video call. They were surely celebrating how well their plan was working, checking if I had already caved. Sunday was more of the same. Her distant behavior was perfectly calculated. Short answers, zero eye contact, excuses to stay busy. At one point, I passed her in the living room. "Good morning," I said in a friendly tone. She gave me a tight smile and looked back at her phone without saying a single word. Before, I would have insisted, would have asked what was wrong, but that naive version of me no longer existed. I simply continued with my tasks. I spent the rest of the day walking around the house mentally classifying our belongings. I noted everything on a spreadsheet, mine, hers, shared. That night, while she took an eternal bath with the door locked, I started packing, but without haste, without chaos, with precision. I stored off-season clothes, books from the lower shelves, tools she never touched, important documents, my grandfather's watch, and other objects with sentimental value. I filled 2 large boxes and took them to the car when she was already asleep. First delivery to the storage unit completed. 4 more days, and she would understand the real price of her little experiment. Monday and Tuesday unfolded identically. Sarah left early without saying goodbye and returned late, going straight to the room or office. Absolute distance, minimal words. Undoubtedly, Lauren, Ashley, and Taylor were advising her every day, and yet, unknowingly, the clock was already ticking for her. Every time Sarah took calls on speakerphone in the home office, I could hear loose fragments of conversations that were never directed at me, but clearly involved me. Between laughs, her friends repeated things like, "He's starting to panic. Hold on, you're doing great." Sometimes they even discussed strategies among themselves, as if they were directing a social experiment, and Sarah was their star participant. What neither they nor my wife imagined was that while they celebrated their little dynamic, I was already advancing silently with my second and third trip to the storage unit, where I had begun to move my things. Clothes that were always mine, kitchen utensils I had contributed when we married, my electronic equipment, my sports gear, and even several family photographs were already boxed up outside the house. All of this while they still believed I would fall into their emotional trap. By Tuesday night, my process had become almost surgical. I calmly checked every corner of the house, separating what truly belonged to me from what we had bought together. Every item that had my receipt or had come into the relationship through me went straight into a cardboard box that then ended up in my car. Sarah, meanwhile, remained too busy feigning distance to notice the true, real distance I had begun to build. The irony was almost poetic. She had decided to ignore me to assess if I would react desperately for her attention, while I was methodically erasing myself from her life, inch by inch, without her perceiving it. She was so committed to the role her friends had assigned her that she couldn't see the tangible reality around her. On Wednesday, after thinking for a few seconds, I called work and notified them I would not be coming in. I needed that full day. It was the only way to finish everything smoothly. Sarah had left before 7 a.m., probably to avoid even the possibility of exchanging a word with me, and thus keeping the strategy intact. That day became the final phase of my plan. I hired a small moving team to remove the furniture that was exclusively mine. My study desk, the recliner I bought before meeting her, the bed I had designated for when my parents visited. While they worked, I finished emptying my drawers, packed the clothes that were still left, and reviewed the shared items one by one. If we had 2 nightstands, I took 1. If there were 6 dining chairs, I took 3. If there were shared sets of plates, I kept the exact half. Her belongings, on the other hand, remained intact, as if I had never passed through that space. In the afternoon, I carried out another series of changes that I had been mentally preparing for weeks. I updated my mailing address to the new apartment. I modified my personal insurances to be solely under my name and proceeded to close our joint credit card following the formal authorization of my lawyer, Mr. Callahan. Afterward, I reviewed the utilities and removed my name from each one, leaving them exclusively under Sarah's responsibility. By Thursday night, everything was completely resolved. My things were located in my new home or stored in the depot. My financial accounts were already separated, and my life had taken on a new structure that Sarah would not have access to. Only one last step, and the final letter remained. That night, Sarah returned after another day dedicated to deliberately ignoring me. She entered the house as if she were a temporary guest, went straight to the bedroom with her takeout dinner, and locked herself in there again, as she had been doing all week. From the hallway, I heard her talking on FaceTime with Lauren, Ashley, and Taylor, laughing about the supposed success of the strategy. Tomorrow is the big day, day 7. You'll see how desperate he is for you, one of them commented enthusiastically. Another suggested I would surely be preparing some surprise to show remorse. They didn't have the slightest idea of what was actually happening. I was sitting in the practically empty living room, a space she hadn't set foot in for days, while I finished writing the letter with the calm that only absolute certainty brings. I wanted it to be clear, direct, without unnecessary aggression, but also without leaving cracks or ambiguities where she could justify herself. When I finished, I folded it precisely, put it in an envelope, and left it ready for the next morning. At exactly 5:30 a.m. on Friday, I left the house for the last time. Sarah was still sleeping upstairs, exhausted after spending every night excitedly reporting the progress of her experiment. I left the envelope clearly visible, carefully leaning against the coffee maker she used every morning without fail. I looked around one last time. 6 years of life together, reduced to empty rooms and silent walls. Yesterday that place still felt like a home. That morning it was simply a reminder of what happens when someone tries to test someone who is already clear about their worth, their boundaries, and their dignity. I locked the door, left the key on the porch railing, and walked away without looking back. By 6 a.m., I was at my new apartment located in a different neighborhood across town. I spent several hours organizing my things in the closet, connecting my devices, and making every room exactly how I wanted it. Then, I completely turned off my cell phone, disabled location on all my apps, closed my social media, and secured every digital backup. If Sarah wanted to practice ghosting, she was about to discover what it meant to do it for real, not the superficial version her friends had imagined. Meanwhile, Sarah had everything prepared for her day of victory, Day 8, the grand finale. She had reserved a happy hour with Lauren, Ashley, and Taylor to celebrate the supposed triumph of the experiment and, according to them, the strengthening of her healthy boundaries. Afterward, she would return home to let herself be found again, expecting me to be anxious for her attention, grateful for her return, or even remorseful for having caused tension in the relationship. She left work at 5 p.m., practically euphoric. At the bar, her friends were already waiting for her with drinks served. Lauren toasted Sarah. A full week setting boundaries and showing your worth. Ashley raised her glass too. How do you feel? Empowered. More confident. Sarah smiled, convinced that everything was going as expected. Yes, I think this really benefited our relationship. I feel like Michael respected my need for space, she said, completely sure of a narrative that never existed. Taylor recorded the conversation, ready to upload it to social media as motivational content. And what's the plan for tonight? She asked. Will you make him work for it? Or will you welcome him warmly? Sarah hesitated for a moment, as if analyzing different possible endings for her own script. I think I'll let him take me out to dinner, she replied confidently. He's probably spent all week thinking about how to make up for all this and show he cared. After laughs and toasts, Sarah finished her drink and left for the house at 6:30 p.m. She arrived promptly at 7 p.m. My car wasn't there, but she didn't find it strange. Maybe, she thought, I had gone out to buy something. She walked in, saying playfully, "Honey, I'm home." Silence. Nothing. She went to the kitchen to put down her bag and saw the envelope in a matter of seconds, her name clearly written in my handwriting. She felt an immediate knot in her stomach. This was not planned. It wasn't part of the story she had imagined. She opened it with trembling hands. Inside, she found my letter and began to read. "Sarah, I know everything about the experiment. I heard the entire conversation with Lauren, Ashley, and Taylor last Tuesday when I got home earlier than expected. I heard them tell you to ignore me to establish dominance and measure my reaction. I also heard how you agreed to turn our marriage into a game for their entertainment. You wanted to test how much I would fight for your attention. I decided to fight for my dignity. By the time you read this, I will be completely gone. I transferred my half of our savings to an individual account. Statements are attached. I removed my name from the utilities. Now they are solely your responsibility. I only took what belonged to me before the marriage and the exact half of what we bought together. I am not furious. I am disappointed. The woman I married would never have resorted to psychological games to feel in control. She would never have allowed a group of office colleagues to convince her to manipulate someone she claimed to love. She would have tried to talk to me instead of testing me as if our relationship were an experiment. But that version of you seems to have disappeared, replaced by someone who believed that imposing dominance was more important than building real communication. If you wanted to check if I was going to fight for this marriage, here is the answer. I do not fight for relationships where I am treated like a lab project. I do not beg for attention from someone who uses silence as a weapon, and much less do I participate in dynamics designed by your colleagues who view marriage as a competition instead of an alliance. I have already contacted a lawyer. The corresponding documentation will arrive in the coming days. But for now, I need distance. A true distance, not the distorted version you use to manipulate me, to consider whether this marriage is something I should try to repair or simply end. The difference between your silence and mine is clear. Yours was a test. Mine is a boundary. I have left my lawyer's contact information, Mr. Callahan, inside the envelope. From this moment on, any communication must go exclusively through him. Michael P.S. Perhaps you should rethink who you are getting advice from, especially if their relationship history involves more failures than successes. The letter slipped from her trembling hands as reality crashed into her. She ran to the bedroom trying to find some sign of me. My side of the closet was completely empty. No clothes, no shoes, not a single belonging. She opened the drawers in desperation, only to find them just as empty. Even my nightstand had disappeared without her noticing. She ran to the bathroom, barely able to breathe. My toothbrush, my razor, my shampoo. Everything was gone. She rushed to the garage looking for a clue and found the same emptiness. My tools had been removed from the board. My camping gear was no longer on the shelves, and even my winter tires had disappeared from the storage area. She immediately grabbed her phone and dialed my number with trembling hands. "The number you are trying to reach is not available." She tried to send me messages. All failed. She checked the location app, but nothing appeared. My social media showed a generic message. Account unavailable. It was obvious to her. Not only had I left, I had erased every possibility of access to me. Then a second thought struck her. The bank accounts. She opened the app, trembling. The joint savings account, previously at $52,000, now showed $26,000, the exact half. I had only withdrawn what was mine. The joint checking account showed only the $800 that corresponded to her part. Everything I did was balanced, legal, transparent, and documented. Sarah slowly slid down the wall until she sat on the floor of the now half-empty bedroom. It was then that she understood the full weight of her decision. She had wanted to test her husband's love by intentionally ignoring him, and she ended up discovering that I loved myself more than I was willing to tolerate any form of manipulation. The following days were a whirlwind of desperation for her. She called my best friend, Brandon, several times, begging him for a clue. He only looked at her with disappointment. He told me everything, Sarah. The silence, the test, everything. I'm not going to tell you where he is. He wants distance. Real distance, not the kind you faked during your experiment. Then she called my brother, Evan, who answered but offered no comfort. He told me everything. And frankly, I think he's doing the right thing. You don't test someone you love, much less allow your coworkers to encourage you to treat your husband like an experiment for entertainment. Sarah even went to my lawyer's office, convinced she could talk to me if she insisted enough. She didn't even get past the reception. "I'm sorry," the receptionist said professionally, "but Mr. Callahan has requested that all communication be conducted solely through established legal channels. You will receive the documentation at your residence." Building security had to escort her out. That Saturday, Sarah organized a group call with Lauren, Ashley, and Taylor. Her voice sounded broken. "So he's serious about the separation?" Ashley asked, surprised. "Yes," Sarah replied. "Everyone I've contacted tells me the same thing. He doesn't plan to back down. His lawyer won't let me talk to him. His friends refuse to tell me where he is." And suddenly her tone changed, full of reproach. "This is your fault. You convinced me this idea was good. You said it would make him value me more." "Wait a minute," Lauren intervened defensively. "We gave you advice. The decision was yours. But you said it would work. That he would react." "Most men do," Ashley countered. "Yours simply overreacted." Sarah exploded. "Overreacted, really? I ignored him for a whole week as part of a test, and he responded by protecting himself." "That's overreacting?" Taylor intervened with a cautious tone. "Maybe you need to give him more time. Men are emotional too. They make impulsive decisions." "Impulsive?" Sarah repeated, incredulous. There was nothing impulsive about this. He planned it day after day. While I was following your silly game, he was opening new accounts, hiring a lawyer, and packing up his entire life. "Sarah, calm down," Lauren retorted with that condescending tone she always used. "You're not thinking clearly." "I am thinking clearer than ever," Sarah replied firmly. "I just realized I destroyed my marriage by listening to 3 women who haven't even managed to have stable relationships. How could I let you, precisely you, influence my relationship?" The silence on the other end of the line said it all. Sarah had abruptly hung up the call, almost impulsively, as if that simple gesture could silence the disaster already unleashed. She didn't allow anyone to respond or her colleagues to try to justify the unjustifiable. However, the silence that followed didn't bring relief. It only deepened the sense of vertigo that had been with her for days. On Wednesday morning, her world took an unexpected turn. Among the usual mail, she found a thick, official envelope, a petition for legal separation. It had my details, her full name, and the courthouse seal. Inside, there was also an extensive letter from my lawyer, Mr. Callahan, carefully drafted. That document marked a before and after for her. The letter began by explaining that to even evaluate the possibility of starting couples therapy, she had to meet 5 strict conditions. They were not negotiable, nor were they written to soften the blow. Cut off definitively any kind of link with Lauren, Ashley, and Taylor, without exceptions, without excuses, without maybe in the future. Write an honest letter addressed to herself, explaining why she had considered it tolerable to manipulate her husband in the name of supposed emotional autonomy. Maintain 30 days without contacting me. No messages, no calls, no accidentally looking for me in places we used to frequent. Once that period was met, she had to request mediation exclusively through Mr. Callahan's office, except that compliance with the conditions did not guarantee reconciliation. There were no promises, only the possibility of starting to talk. The last part of the letter was the one that shook her the most. "Mr. Michael does not feel hatred toward you. He is deeply hurt and needs to protect himself. If you truly want to save this relationship, respect his boundaries and demonstrate it with real actions. If you do not agree to these terms, the divorce will proceed without further delay." Sarah reread everything several times. Each time she finished, the emotional weight seemed to double. It wasn't just the formality of the document. It was the confirmation that I was no longer willing to tolerate what she had decided to do to me. She took out her laptop as if she needed to anchor herself to something tangible. She spent hours writing, deleting, and rewriting her personal letter. In it, she confronted the reasons that led her to allow 3 coworkers to direct her behavior as if I were part of a test. She acknowledged the fear of not belonging, the need for constant approval, and how she had preferred to accept other people's distorted view of her marital life rather than defend what we had built in 6 years. The next morning, she acted with uncharacteristic speed. She walked to human resources with a knot in her throat but a clear objective. "I need to request a department transfer," she said bluntly. "The people I work with gave me bad personal advice that ruined my marriage. If I want to save it, I have to distance myself from them completely." The HR analyst took note, asked her several formal questions, and surprisingly, the transfer was approved that same day. With that, Sarah had met 2 conditions in less than 24 hours, but what came next required a different kind of strength. Waiting a full month without any idea if I wanted to see her again. That month became interminable. In the new department, she remained almost invisible, dedicated to basic tasks and avoiding unnecessary conversations. She began private therapy, took detailed notes on her process, and forced herself to establish routines that reminded her why she was doing all this. Not because of my presence, but because of her own lack of character against the influence of those who had never truly cared about her. In the 3rd week, an incident occurred that marked her even more. As she walked to her car in the parking lot, Lauren appeared behind her. "Are you really going to choose a man over us?" she shouted, annoyed at having been blocked. "What kind of woman does that?" Sarah didn't even answer. She kept walking with a firm step, without turning around. Inside, however, she thought clearly. "I choose my dignity over people who enjoy seeing others fail." Finally, day 30 arrived. She did not hesitate. She called Mr. Callahan's office and requested mediation. She knew that this gesture alone didn't guarantee anything, but it was the step she needed to take. 7 days later, she was sitting in a large room full of folders, screens, and legal documents. On the table, she placed everything she had prepared: the official approval of the work transfer, screenshots demonstrating she had blocked the 3 women, her personal letter written with painful honesty, and proof of her therapy attendance. The lawyer reviewed everything professionally, without passing judgment. "I will present this to Mr. Michael," he said, placing the documents in a blue folder. "If he is willing, we will contact you to schedule the mediation." Another 7-day wait began, marked by sleepless nights and days where time seemed to stand still. When the date finally arrived, Sarah was sitting in the office of Dr. Megan Sullivan, moving restlessly, trying to control her breathing. The clock struck 3 when the door opened, and I walked in. I saw her immediately tense up. I wasn't the same either. I had lost weight. My posture was less relaxed, and the expression on my face was difficult to decipher. There was no fury, but an indelible distance. Still, my eyes showed clarity, like someone who knows exactly which path they decided to take. I sat across from her with the mediator between us. "Thank you for attending," Dr. Sullivan began in a balanced tone. "This space is completely safe, and today's purpose is to facilitate communication without interruptions or unnecessary confrontations." She looked at me first. "Mr. Michael, you requested this mediation as a preliminary step to determine if couples therapy might make sense. Ms. Sarah has met all the initial conditions. If you agree, we will begin." I nodded without taking my eyes off the table until I finally dared to look at Sarah. She took a deep breath before speaking. "Michael," she began, her voice trembling, "I am genuinely sorry. Not just because you left, but because I was the one who crossed a massive line. I disrespected you and allowed other people to direct my behavior. I turned our marriage into an experiment, as if your emotions were something that could be manipulated at will. And I did it because I let 3 people who don't know you influence me." I listened without interrupting her. She continued, I didn't doubt you or your love. I doubted myself. They made our stable and honest relationship seem boring. They made me believe that your consistency was complacency, and I believed them because I wanted to fit in. In therapy, I'm discovering how much value I've always given to the opinions of others, even at the expense of my own convictions. Dr. Sullivan guided us through several complex questions, analyzing emotions, expectations, and boundaries. And then came the inevitable question. Mr. B. Michael, the mediator said with a neutral but firm tone, with everything you have heard today and considering the effort made by Ms. Sarah, would you be willing to attempt couples therapy to evaluate if your relationship can be rebuilt? I remained silent. For a long time. I thought about the hurt, the empty nights, the feeling of betrayal, but also about what we once were. The answer was still forming, but the decision hung by a thread that only I could tighten or release. Sarah held her breath as if any movement could collapse the little that remained standing between us. I was the first to break the silence, though my voice sounded firmer than I felt inside. Yes, I finally said, but with very clear conditions. We will remain legally separated while we attend therapy, weekly sessions for a minimum of 3 months. And if at any point I feel you are not being sincere, if you start making excuses or you contact those coworkers again, then it ends. There will be no second chance after this second chance. Sarah nodded with an almost imperceptible gesture and asked in a faint voice, "And if I do everything right? If I prove that I have truly changed?" "Then, when the 3 months pass, we will reevaluate the situation," I replied. "Perhaps we'll live together again. Maybe we'll even consider renewing our vows on a more solid foundation. It is possible to build something better than what we had, but possible is not a guarantee, Sarah. It's just an option." She began to weep openly. "A possibility is more than I deserve," she murmured. "It's more than many people would have given you," I replied without harshness. "But I made you promises, for better and for worse. This is clearly the worst, but I'm willing to see if we can get back to the best." The next 3 months became a kind of precise reconstruction. Weekly sessions, daily communication, small but constant progress. By the 5th week, I found myself smiling unintentionally during a session. Afterward, we went for coffee. There, I told her, "I miss you, but I don't miss who you were when you listened to those people." "I don't want to be that version of myself either," Sarah responded, looking at me with a mix of sadness and determination. The real test came in the 4th month. Sarah ran into Ashley by chance at a downtown cafe. Before she could leave, Ashley approached her with false warmth. "Sarah, long time no see. I know things got complicated, but we were only trying to help you. You know that, right?" Sarah felt that old need to avoid conflict, to please, to smooth over any tension. But this time she thought of me, of us, of what she had lost by valuing outside opinions more than her own marriage. "No, Ashley," she said with firm serenity. "You weren't trying to help me. You projected your own problems onto my relationship, and I'm no longer interested in reclaiming that friendship." Ashley's face immediately hardened. "I see Michael really brainwashed you." Sarah didn't move an inch. "Michael didn't brainwash me," she replied. "He held me accountable for my decisions, which is very different." She picked up her coffee. "I hope someday you understand that a relationship isn't a power game, but that's no longer my problem." She walked out with her head held high. She told me about it that very night in our regular session. "How did you feel?" I asked. "It was difficult, but completely right," she responded. "I didn't need you to make the decision for me. I made it because it was the best thing for me." I nodded, genuinely moved. That was what I needed to see. In the 5th month, we had our first formal date in a long time. We had dinner at a restaurant we used to frequent. At the end, as we were leaving, I kissed her forehead. "I'm coming back," I told her. "Coming back to us." 6 weeks later, after steady progress, It was me who spoke from the heart. I still love you. I never stopped loving you. I just stopped feeling safe with you. Sarah's eyes filled with emotion. I will dedicate the rest of my life to making you feel safe with me again. I promise. 6 months after moving out, I told Mr. Callahan that we were ready. I returned home that Saturday. Sarah had prepared the space with simplicity. My side of the closet waiting for me. Empty. My favorite coffee in the pantry. Nothing theatrical, just partnership. That night on the back porch, Sarah murmured, I never thought we would reach this point. I thought I had lost you forever. You were close, I admitted. If you had made excuses, if you had blamed me or pressured me during those 30 days, I would have filed for divorce. I know, but you didn't. You gave me the opportunity to repair what I broke. I took her hand. I'm coming back because you didn't ignore what happened. You understood it and faced it. A year later, we hosted a dinner with our true friends. Brandon raised his glass. A toast to Michael and Sarah, who proved that a relationship can be rebuilt with honesty and real commitment, not with absurd tests. At the end of the night, as we tidied up, I looked at Sarah. Do you know the difference now? I said. Before, I loved you, but I took too much for granted. Now, I love you and I value you. I no longer take you for granted. I didn't lose you, Sarah whispered. I lost myself, and I had to win you back. And I think we both learned something, I replied. You learned that tests destroy trust. I learned that consequences clarify everything. Later in bed, Sarah broke the silence. Do you think we are stronger now? I thought for a moment. Yes, we are stronger because we rebuilt this with sincerity, with clear boundaries, without assumptions, without that blind love that did so much damage. I'm sorry it took almost losing you to understand it, she said. I know, I replied, and you've proven it every day, but don't carry eternal guilt. Don't be, I'm sorry forever. Be better forever. That's the real apology. Sarah nodded with conviction. I will. I promise you. I know, I added. And remember, if you ever break this again, I will leave without hesitation. And that time, there will be no conditions for return. It wasn't a threat. It was a healthy, necessary, and fair boundary. And Sarah loved me more for it, because she learned something essential. True love doesn't need tests. It needs trust. And that trust is only sustained by constant actions, sincere communication, and the ability to walk away from anyone who treats you as if your worth depends on the approval of others. Some lines, once crossed, change everything. But with authentic work, they can sometimes be rebuilt and become stronger than before.